You need to know this man, Larry Ellison. He's the second richest man in the world, owner of Oracle, besties with Trump, a very supportive dad, and him and his son David are on track to own the entire film and media distribution pipeline. From the studios that produce films and television, to streaming networks and theaters, to the news and social media platforms we use to promote them, down to the data and algorithms powering those platforms. But before we can get to present day, we need a history lesson. The theater system, in a nutshell. Movies have been around in some shape or form since about 1895, but we don't get the first feature-length film with synchronized dialogue until The Jazz Singer in 1927. And that basically kicks off the golden age of cinema during the 30s and 40s. Movies become the primary form of entertainment, and at its height, 65% of Americans attend the movie theater weekly, some twice a week. Money was being made, stars were being born, culture was being shaped, but only by a very select few, because back then the studios owned every step of the creative process. They owned the writers, actors, directors, and crew by putting them under contract. They owned all the post-production facilities and film processors, and they distributed the films themselves because they owned the movie theaters and therefore controlled what they showed. This made filmmaking a nearly impossible industry to break into. And if you were lucky and crafty enough to have put together your own independent film, you still might not have anywhere to show it. If the major studios decided that you were a threat, or you were a minority, or maybe they just don't like you, they owned the venues, so they could shut you out and no one would see your film. Then, in 1948, we have the Paramount decision. In an antitrust lawsuit, the Department of Justice sued the Big Five: Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, RKO Pictures, and Paramount. They also sued the Little Three: Universal Pictures, Columbia Pictures, and United Artists, for engaging in illegal and anti-competitive behavior. The case has a lot of ups and downs, but what you really need to know is that it makes it all the way to the Supreme Court, and they rule 7-1 against the studios, forcing them all to sell their theater chains and sending the clear message that it is illegal to own the entire process. This decision makes it illegal for motion picture companies to also own exhibition companies. Because of this, we get a wave of both independently owned theaters and new independent film. Filmmakers can finally have their films seen. We see more experimentation, more creative freedom, more foreign cinema. There's just more opportunities for unique stories to be told. Things were not perfect afterwards, and it would take a whole separate video to get into the nitty-gritty history of film distribution and how the studios managed to still keep their thumbs on the scales even after they were forced to sell off their theaters. But overall, it made a positive difference, and it helped to dismantle a rapidly growing oligopoly. Mergers, mergers, mergers. I want to start by saying that studio mergers are generally never a good thing. Usually when studios combine, they make less films and creatives lose avenues for production and distribution. Sometimes when people hear this, they don't understand how that's the case. I've heard the argument that if companies are able to combine their resources, then in theory that should allow them to invest more and make better films. But instead, think of it this way. Art is subjective, which means the same piece might rub two different people two different ways. So you could take your script or your film to Posh Posh Productions and their head of development hates it. But then you take it over to Tree Hugger Films and they love it and want to hop on board immediately. Now, if Posh Posh and Tree Hugger decide to combine forces, or Posh Posh buys Tree Hugger and fires their head of development, as is common in these situations, you've just lost a potential avenue for development. That's what happens most often during mergers. Less opportunities, less diversity of stories, and oftentimes many projects and positions get scrapped as the purchasing business is scrambling trying to find ways to save cash and recoup all the money that they just spent in their latest acquisition. So, with that in mind, there are two important mergers in this story: Warner Bros. Discovery and Paramount Skydance. 3 years ago, Warner Bros. Announced that they were going to acquire Discovery. It was a messy and fraught-filled acquisition that cost billions of dollars, resulted in hundreds of lost jobs, numerous scrap projects, and a couple silly rebrands. The FTC tried to fight it, and they lost. It hasn't been all bad. Warner Bros. Has had an incredible year in terms of their releases, with 7 consecutive $40 million openings. And they've been almost single-handedly proving the power of and demand for original stories with hits like Sinners and Weapons. Though it's hard to say if that's because of the merger or if they just already had great projects lined up. Regardless, the merger was widely regarded as a huge mess. And just when it seemed like they got everything settled and squared away, they announced they were splitting. Warner Bros. Is going back to being Warner Bros. Discovery is going back to being Discovery. The plan was finalized earlier this year, and the separation is scheduled to take effect in 2026. Paramount Skydance has seemingly been less messy, but no less public. It is important to know that David Ellison, Larry Ellison's son, was the CEO of Skydance during the merger discussions. And after the companies merged, he became the chairman and singular CEO of the combined company. Now, as Paramount Skydance are waiting on FCC approval for the merger, 3 interesting things happen. 1, the FCC revives a dismissed complaint against CBS. Keep in mind, CBS is owned by Paramount. In October 2024, a right-wing law firm called the Center for American Rights filed an FCC complaint. They alleged that 60 Minutes had engaged in news distortion for the way they edited a clip of Kamala Harris responding to a question about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The FCC commissioner at the time, Jessica Rosenworcel, I hope I've got that right, dismissed the complaint. Then, in 2025, when the new administration started, the new FCC chair, Brendan Carr, revived the complaint. Even though the complaint should be completely separate from the FCC's approval of the Paramount Skydance merger, Brendan Carr would publicly state that he would be taking it into account while reviewing the Paramount Skydance merger. 2, simultaneously, and in a completely separate lawsuit, Donald Trump personally files a civil suit against CBS for $20 billion. He also publicly calls for the network to lose their broadcast license. Broadcast licenses are managed by the FCC. On July 2nd, 2025, CBS settles the lawsuit with Trump and agrees to pay him $16 million. And 3, on July 17th, 2025, CBS cancels Late Night with Stephen Colbert. This happens 3 days after Stephen Colbert had publicly called the Trump-CBS settlement a bribe. This also comes after Donald Trump publicly stated that he would like Stephen Colbert to be terminated. The reporting for this is all over the place, with some people claiming the cancellation was already in the pipeline and others saying it was not. CBS claims that the cancellation was purely financial and that there was no political influence behind it. But coincidentally, a week later, on July 24th, the FCC approves the Paramount Skydance merger. Skydance pays $8 billion, with a B, $8 billion to acquire Paramount, of which $6 billion, 6 of them, come from Larry Ellison himself. Talk about a good dad. Where is my daddy owe me some money. Father knows best. So now we can answer the question. Who is Larry Ellison? For starters, he is the billionaire co-founder and executive chairman of Oracle Corporation, one of the world's largest software and cloud computing companies. They make the technology that runs behind the scenes, things like data storage, enterprise software, financial systems, and cloud infrastructure for major companies, governments, banks, airlines, hospitals. Even if you have never used an Oracle branded app, you have almost certainly interacted with Oracle's technology, either through airline booking systems or credit card transactions, online stores, healthcare networks. They all rely on Oracle databases. Larry's the guy behind that. He's also a strategic investor, a very accomplished yacht racer, and a lover of real estate. But not like buy a couple houses the way us normies deal with real estate. He literally owns 98% of the Hawaiian island of Lanai. My daddy owes me money. With an estimated net worth of $341 billion, he is unfathomably wealthy and briefly surpassed Elon Musk as the richest man in the world. He is also close friends with Donald Trump, having been friends since before his presidency. Now, just weeks after finalizing the Paramount Skydance merger, David Ellison, Larry's son, publicly announced that Paramount Skydance would be interested in purchasing Warner Bros. Discovery for cash. And I just want to pause and emphasize real quick that when they made this offer, WBD was not for sale. It wasn't for sale. They decided that they wanted it, and so they said, hey, we'll buy it. And now at this point, everybody else was like, we're allowed to do that? So now other people are putting in offers, and now WBD is like, I guess we're for sale. But they weren't originally for sale. The Ellisons just said they wanted it. You might be wondering, how is Paramount Skydance able to offer that much money after they just completed this major transaction? And the answer is, Larry's financing it. That said, they only have one condition. They want the whole package. Don't split up Warner Bros. And Discovery. They want them both. Paramount Skydance has already made 3 offers for WBD, all of which have been rejected by the company on the grounds of being too low. But remember whose pockets are behind all this. They could make a 4th bid. A 5th. And if Warner Bros. Keeps rejecting their offers, Paramount Skydance could decide to bypass the board altogether and go straight to the shareholders. That is the amount of money and power we're dealing with here. As you can imagine, whistleblowers have already sounded the alarm, with the WGA vowing to work with regulators to block the transaction. And Elizabeth Warren has called the deal, if allowed to close, a dangerous concentration of power. And she's correct. To be clear, if this deal went through, that would be one company owning HBO, CNN, CBS News and Sports, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Animal Planet, Comedy Central, The Discovery Channel, The Food Network, Adult Swim, Boomerang, Teen Nick, Showtime, Paramount and Paramount Plus, Cinemax, The Travel Channel, The CW, TBS, BET, MTV, TLC, TNT, HGTV, and VH1. And I'm pretty sure I'm missing a couple in there. That is frightening on its own. But then we add in TikTok. Someone save TikTok. A brief history of Donald Trump and TikTok. As president in 2020, Trump tried to ban TikTok in the US, claiming it was a national security threat because of its US ownership. He signed executive orders to try and force a sale, and even supported a proposed deal where Oracle and Walmart would take control, though that plan never fully materialized. After leaving office, Trump actually softened his stance, later saying that he liked TikTok because it was, quote, popular with young people, and hurting Facebook, which he viewed as politically opposed to him. Most recently, Trump has again reversed course, saying that the app and company are dangerous in Chinese hands and requiring that they find American ownership or suffer being blocked in the United States. That brought us this very stupid cultural moment in January where a bunch of influencers started confessing their sins and saying that they were actually faking their content and they'd had cosmetic surgery up until the app shut down. And then we got this very dystopian message when it was back up 2 hours later. Now, the conditions for this restoration required that TikTok find an American owner. And for months, negotiations were taking place in the background. Then on September 17th, 2025, it was announced that we have a deal. TikTok would sell its US assets to a consortium of companies and investors, including Rupert Murdoch, Michael Dell, and Oracle. And remember who owns Oracle? According to Donald Trump, Oracle will play a large role in TikTok US, which includes auditing the social media algorithm. And this is very important. A person's algorithm shapes their worldview. What does and does not get shown on social media shapes a person's perception of reality. The president's best friend tinkering with the algorithm should concern you, regardless of who the president is. Because in a world where most young people get their news from social media, neither the president nor the people close to him should be allowed to manually control what news they see. If both of these deals, Paramount Skydance purchasing Warner Bros. Discovery and Oracle having a major stake in TikTok, go through, this family will own almost the entire production system and pipeline of how our news and media get made. I'm not saying they'll own every single company, but they will own many of them, and they will have ownership at every step of the process. They will own the production companies. They will own finance. They will own the media properties themselves, the shows, the film. They will own the networks, both live and digital, as well as one of the biggest social media platforms that currently exists, and the data and algorithms that power it. They could also, if they so choose, own the movie theaters that distribute films, because remember that Supreme Court ruling that said studios can't own movie theaters? Well, they overturned it in 2022. To be clear, I'm not saying the Ellisons are bad people. I don't know them. And I have no idea what their intentions are because unlike a lot of Trump allies, they're actually pretty tight-lipped about their political agendas. But the problem is that regardless of who holds the power, no one should have this much. I think it should go without saying how dangerous it is if a single person or entity controls what films and stories get made, how they get made, where they get shown, how they get shown, and who they're shown to. I think it should go without saying how dangerous it is if our news networks and our social media and the algorithms behind them are all controlled by one person who has the power to push whatever agenda they see fit and stifle whatever ideology, lifestyle, or subject matter they disagree with. I think it should go without saying how dangerous it is to concentrate that much power, that much reach in a time of increasing polarization where political violence is being initiated by people radicalized online by intentional disinformation. But just in case, I'll say it. This is deeply disturbing and concerning. Even if they can't buy Warner Bros. Discovery, they still have a staggering amount of power. And I am terrified of what something like this could do to our already fraught and fractured socio-political landscape. But I don't want to just fearmonger, so here are the solutions I've been able to come up with. First, contact these regulators directly. The Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice Antitrust Division are the key agencies that review mergers for monopolistic impact. And citizens like yourself can submit public comments and letters to these agencies opposing such mergers. The FTC in particular keeps public record of comments during review periods. Second, pressure your elected official. Write or call your representatives urging them to oppose these mergers. Implore them to hold hearings on media consolidation. Express that you are deeply concerned by the continued consolidation of power in this country and that you compel them to fight for the consumer by pushing for stronger antitrust legislation. Next, support independent media, and that means both news and entertainment. As things have gotten spookier, we have seen a rise in independent journalism as well as independent artists. And I think that's fantastic and so necessary as we see more of our cultural institutions collapse. I'm also going to advocate that you support your local cinemas. As of right now, things seem to be okay. But if things keep getting worse and we continue to see an uptick in state-sponsored media, which we are already seeing, it's not going to be long before we see people with very concerning ideology purchasing movie theaters and deciding what does and does not get shown. Your locally owned cinema is going to be a safe space during that time. And lastly, you can join or support a media reform organization. There are groups that actively lobby against harmful media consolidation and advocate for antitrust enforcement. You can contribute time, money, or even just visibility through your social channels. Now, I have never personally worked with one of these before, but from my research, Public Knowledge and Open Markets Institute both seem like solid organizations. My final thought, and I'm still workshopping this one myself, is that maybe we should consider returning to the old ways of the internet. One of the reasons why this algorithm stuff is so scary is because TikTok, social media as a whole, has become everything for us. It's our news source, our recipe book, our place to fall down a rabbit hole, our third space. But it didn't used to be this way. You used to get your news from one place, your entertainment from another. Your special niche interests came from a special niche magazine, or at the very least, a special niche website. We have flattened the internet and part of our real life into one singular place, and it is costing us. I know that it's easier said than done, and I'll be the first to admit that I don't know how to fully disentangle things because our media landscape has shifted in such a way that it's hard to go back. There are less niche magazines to subscribe to. The news stations have shifted and become less reliable. But I want to leave you with the idea that nothing is ever set in stone. That can be terrifying or liberating, depending on how you want to view it. It means that we should never get too comfortable because there will always be someone or something waiting to take advantage of the peaceful times and cause harm to others for their own gain. But it also means that no matter how ugly or hopeless or impossible a situation might look, it doesn't have to remain that way. And we don't have to have all the answers right now, so long as we're asking the question and approaching every situation with solution-oriented eyes.